Hi, welcome to Wine with Chris. And as you can see, we're yet again on location. We're in a hidden secret bunker somewhere on the Isle of Ireland. And I'm with my good friend, friend of the channel, longtime friend, probably my best friend from childhood, Mr. Gary Burns. And we're here, as I say, secret location. And we've got two cracking wines to show you and to share with each other here this evening. And they are, you can see them just at the front here. We've got a Castello Banfi. We're just going to give the name because we'll talk in detail in a few minutes. And a Cheval des Andes. So, Gary, welcome to Wine with Chris. Why have we chosen these two wines this evening?
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me here. It's a privilege to be on Wine with Chris. So hello, everybody. Really, why have we chosen these two wines? A lot of people ask. They're very different wines. Bear no linkage or relation. And it literally comes down to one simple thing between Chris and myself is I have never had the Banfi and Chris has never had the Cheval des Andes. And we really wanted to pick a wine individually for each of us that was special to us. So it's really about a special wine that we wanted to share with each other because we rarely get to see each other. So that's really the essence of why we're doing this and why we've chosen those two wines in particular.
Perfectly put. And I'll flip into the first of those two wines. And in fact, just to start here, so in this glass we have the Castello Banfi. And I don't know, I'm bringing it really close there. I'm surprised by that wine, and both Gary and I were. It's quite translucent. You can see right through it, and as Gary said off camera, it's almost like looking at a Pinot Noir. By contrast, the Cheval des Andes is inky dark purple, and quite opaque. And why are these special wines for us? Well, I'm going to talk to the Banfi. Gary's going to talk to the Cheval des Andes. The Banfi, special wine for me, because it harks right back to the days I used to spend with another great friend and another friend of the channel, Andre, back in our Swiss days. We didn't make it to Brunello di Montalcino or that far south in Italy together, but for some reason it was readily available where we lived in Zurich, and it was a wine that we would buy year after year. I don't remember it being, in my mind, 40 francs, so, under £30. I don't remember it being a super expensive wine, but it was one that we just fell in love with, and you kind of tasted it once and thought, I'm getting every vintage of that. It would often come out at the barbecues and so on. So that's why it's a special wine for me. As I say, it's not special in the sense that I've visited Banfi. So I've never been to Brunello di Montalcino, but it is, if you think of the map of Italy, and I know some followers of the channel love to see the maps, and I'm sorry I don't have one, so use your imagination. You've got Florence, and then you've got Siena, sort of beneath each other vertically, and that's in Tuscany, obviously, and then over to the west, and then to the east you've got Umbria, and just in that line, Florence, Siena. Then beneath that you've got Brunello di Montalcino, which is a small-ish fortified town, and Castello di Banfi is one of the main producers there. What's interesting about it is that they're not only producing their own wine on estate, but they've actually become a major distributor of worldwide wines into Italy. So they've got the exclusive rights of wines from Chile, from Champagne, from all over the world that they distribute into Italy. So they're more than just a vineyard themselves. I think they're quite a big operation. So if we move to it, Gary, and have a look at it closer, it's 100% Sangiovese. It's from inland, so it's not influenced by the sea or anything. Gently sloping, clay soil, and what's interesting is it's aged in French oak, so French oak barrels. So we should be expecting a bit of that. But maybe we'll do it in reverse, because I've talked for a bit and I know the wine a bit better than you. Talk us through what are you smelling there?
I'm smelling. It's interesting. It's very, very clear, as Chris said earlier. It's very, very opaque, clear colour. It is like a burgundy. Very much you can see right the way through the glass to the bottom. But I am literally just smelling cherries. It's just all cherries.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. Would you say it's very it's high in fruit on the nose, very fruity?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. There's a real you as you even move to the glass, you can smell that sort of dark fruit.
Yeah.
but it is literally like smelling a bowl of cherries. Is
Yeah.
the easiest way to describe it.
Big legs, 14.5% alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
This by the way is a 2015, which is a stellar vintage in Italy, as we know. 2015 and 16 vie for kind of wines of the decade. I know I'm going against the grain here on the channel because we've talked and talked and talked about leaving your wines to sit for 10 years. The secret sort of additional incentive of trying this wine a bit young is you can buy it on Vivino for a cracking price, £32. And I've got 4, but I'm not happy with 4. So tonight will be the time when we think about whether we need to go back and buy some more. So let's give it a taste, shall we?
Give it a whirl.
Yeah. And it's a really odd thing. I think it's one of those ones where the smell sets you up for a particular taste that you think you're going to get, and then when you actually taste it, it's completely different. Do you agree?
Totally, 100%. It's full in the mouth, but then it disappears.
Yeah.
And after, it is literally a hugely delayed reaction, and then bang, starts sliding down the throat, and then the flavors just come and just keep coming. Just keep coming.
I don't know. I don't know wine like that I can remember, at least, that does that. You've got this huge fruit forward nose, and you're expecting a fruit bomb, and then you put it in your mouth, and there's nothing. As you say, it just disappears. There's no fruit. There's a sort of I get sort of an iron and a bit of tannin, quite tight, quite taut. But then it's almost, as you say, when you've swallowed it, that's when the fun begins. So we've been tasting that Banfi for a few minutes more. And I guess the only thing to say is, it's 2015. According to the theory, it's too young. I've got 2 questions for you. Question number 1, is it too young, do you think? And question number 2, regardless whether it's young now or good drinking, how long do you think this wine's going to last?
Well, I think the first question, is it too young now? Probably not. I think it's probably just on the edge. I think it's just coming in. But in terms of age potential, that will run and run and run. Yeah. You can just tell that. The length of that flavour, I would comfortably say that you'll be drinking that in 10 plus years' time. Because
it's not relying on the fruit today, because the fruit's almost already gone. But it's this amazing thing. I don't think I've had a wine like it whereby all the flavor is once it's left your mouth. Yeah. It's just, that's when the kind of the experience happens, and Absolutely. It just goes on and on for minutes and minutes.
100%.
Do you think that'd be a good food wine?
Yeah, I think that'll pair really well with any red meats, lamb, good steak. Yeah. That would go really well with a good steak, as most reds would, but that in particular would pair really well with, I think lamb would be really good with that. Just a combination. Yeah. I think it would just be really long. The sweetness of the lamb coming in that sort of softer fruit, that length would pair really well. That's
a good call. I hadn't thought about that. Right, shall we move on? Yep. Wine number 2, Cheval des Andes. I know, again, Andre's a big fan of this wine. You're a big fan of this wine. What's special about this wine? Because it's not a cheap wine. What's special about this wine?
No, certainly not cheap, unfortunately. I picked this up a couple of years ago, and I can't even remember whether it was Andre's suggestion, potentially Andre, or just from reading about it, but picked it up a couple of years ago and completely blind, had read a little bit about it, heard good reports. I thought, give it a blast. Wasn't cheap, but the reports were that strong. I thought, well, give it a go. So last year, in fact, I pretty certain this was my favourite red of the year.
This was the Fruity.
This was my Fruity. I'm pretty certain last year. So this is the year we've got is the 2013. So Cheval des Andes, very interesting provenance to this wine. It's from the Mendoza, classic Mendoza region in Argentina. It is a blend. This year in particular is 60-odd% Malbec with about 25% Cab Sauv and about 6 or 8% Petit Verdot. So it is a blended wine, but predominantly Malbec. But the history behind it is almost as interesting as the actual wine itself.
Okay.
Cheval des Andes, it's from the great Saint-Emilion house of Cheval Blanc, which many of you will know. So classic Grand Cru, Class A, House of Saint-Emilion, and the president of Cheval Blanc, Pierre Lurton, is the brainchild behind this wine. So really,
I had no idea. That's fascinating.
This is a really interesting provenance because you've got the French influence. What he wanted to do years ago, they discovered this area. It's a high altitude, cool climate wine. So similar to Kershaw in South Africa. Yeah. But Pierre Lurton really wanted to go back to basics, to the original Malbec style in France, that has pretty much vanished. There's not that much of it around anymore, but in the original grapes and the original vines. Wow. So what they did was years ago they were exported, the original vines from France were exported in the mid-19th century to Argentina, to this region, which was fascinating in itself because literally purely by chance, within the next 20 years, the great pandemic, which the disease in France, Polyxoria, happened in France, which killed a lot of the Malbec vines.
But they'd escaped to
South America. So these are actually the original ungrafted French vines that they come off. So much of the vines now in France, any of the Malbec grapes, are all grafted wines. Wow. So it's almost like, I call this a Back to the Future wine. So you're kind of going back to the future. So it's a combination of trying to bring in all the old historicity from the original French vines that were exported to Mendoza, but put a modern twist on it. Yeah. So Pierre Lurton wanted to bring all the expertise that they had obviously cultivated in Saint-Emilion to this classic Mendoza wine producing region, and they spotted an area and vineyard in the high altitude region. It was called, the vineyard there was called Terras de los Andes. So combination of the two names, Cheval Blanc, Terras de los Andes has become Cheval des Andes. So that's the history behind it. So there's two key areas where they grow the grapes, but the main area would be a vineyard region called Las Computeras, which is Spanish for floodgates, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's really where they grow it. And interestingly, in 99, only as recent as 1999, was the first vintage. So it's a very, very young vineyard and vintage, and inspired by Cheval Blanc, Pierre Lurton, but it's really a staple house now of their vineyard and their grip. But it's just classic Grand Cru. In fact, it's known in Argentina as the Grand Cru of the Andes. That's the name it's given.
Shall we give it a taste?
We shall indeed, yeah.
In fact, let me give it a smell first. I think we both said off camera we're getting sort of dark plum, really sort of massive. That, even cooked plum. If you can get that. So a little bit distinct because the other one was more cherry, more almond-like. This one's very plummy. Let's give it a taste. Again, big legs. And what percentage is this wine?
I don't know if you can see it on the... Yeah, it's 15%. This is a big wine. But it's trying to combine the elegance of Malbec with the structure of French Cab Sauv, classic right bank. But the legs, I'm not sure if you can see it on camera.
Huge.
Probably not, but huge legs to this wine. Yeah. Now, it's 2013. It is built to age. This wine, it has to be said, is built to age. So we're talking about the Banffy comfortably be sitting in your locker for another 10, 15 years easily. This is drinkable now.
Probably longer. Yeah.
But it's opening up.
Yep.
Even from when we opened it an hour ago. But this will keep opening up and keep aging beautifully.
Let's give it a slurp.
Go for it.
What I love is the contrast of these two wines. They're both delicious wines, but in hugely different ways. This one, I think, by contrast to the Banffy, it's all about sort of the mouthfeel, the velvety, very silky smooth, very well-rounded wine. Quite tannic though, but you don't get that initially. It's like sort of jumping and landing on a soft mattress. but then you get the tannin comes in. So those would be the first impressions, really around the structure rather than the taste. What do you think we're looking for in terms of the taste here?
Taste wise, I'm going more plum. It's more plummy,
It's
more
much
that sort of darker fruit. I mean, the
Yeah.
color gives it away.
Very
It's
dark.
literally,
Yeah.
it's almost jet black, inky, purpley.
And it's
Colour.
much more consistent with the aroma than the Banfi.
Correct.
The aroma lies,
Yeah.
but here the aroma doesn't lie. It just it's what
all
you
dark
expect,
fruits. Yeah.
but hugely intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is, I don't know, this is a young wine or a middle-aged wine or an old wine, but this feels like, it's, as you said earlier, it's just unfurling now, and it's only going to get better as the fruits sort of fall back a little bit and the tannins soften. It feels like a wine that you could just enjoy every year, this vintage from now till 2030.
I'll absolutely 100%. I will definitely be buying vertical
Right.
on this wine.
Right.
Because I'm pretty certain, unless you hit a bad vintage, you're going to literally be having decades and decades of enjoyment out of anything in your cabinet from this. It's just got that feel to it. It's got that feel. On one thing, it's just a very interesting side thing with this vineyard is their irrigation system.
Right.
Totally different. It's from the Incas. So they had, from the mountains, they have tracks in the vineyards built using an Inca-generated irrigation system. So so they get water all year round, which means that the roots actually, they have to dive for the water, but also it prevents, importantly, because this was the initial fear, from another pandemic happening and the disease of the insects hitting those vineyards, and it clears all the insects. Right. So it's future-proofed forever, they reckon, with this irrigation system, just purely originally from the fear of having another bout of that in Argentina as opposed to what they had in France. Yeah. But I'll be drinking that for many years to come.
What's the price of this wine? That's the bad news, isn't it?
That's the bad news. That's the hard. But you're probably talking around 60 odd, £70 a bottle. If you can get a good vintage, you're going to be paying 70 to 75 potentially, with duty and bond prices added, included in that. But it isn't a cheap wine. But it's a great wine. It's still a great value wine.
So here at Wine with Chris, we don't want to let our guests, even though they've been hosting us superbly, and we're going to go and take both of these wines and enjoy them with a lovely local fillet steak that's been marinating all day in secret teriyaki sauce. But we don't like to let our guests off easily. And so I'm going to maybe finish up or start to wrap up with a critical question. We said that the Banfi currently on Vivino you can get for about 32 quid. You've just let us into the secret that Cheval des Andes is about twice that.
Yep.
Which is the better value wine?
That is a tough question. I think they're both great wines.
You can take the knee.
That's the first thing. They are both great wines. I think purely value for money, it'd be hard to look beyond the Banfi because it literally is less than half price if you're talking purely monetary value. Which wine would I rather have in 10, 15 years' time? I think I'd drink both very comfortably and happily and get a lot of pleasure out of them. But I think my preference would be for Cheval des Andes.
Have another slurp of the Banfi, but respect that decision. And while you're having a slurp of the Banfi, have a think about this last question. Based on what you've just said, you'd rather have the double the price wine in your cellar. In your experience of wine drinking over the years, is it all just about money talks? The more you spend, the better the wine you get. In your experience,
I think generally, like most things in life, is you get what you pay for, as a general rule of thumb. However, in saying that, one of my greatest pleasures is finding gems at really great prices, and I think the Banfi is a good example of that. So, it probably tastes like a £50-60 bottle of wine, I think.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's nowhere near that price point. So as a gem and a find, and I know we've both found some recent gems recently and shared them with each other, that's almost as much enjoyment
Yes.
when you pick up a
Yes.
gem at a great value, as actually enjoying the wine, because you know, when you've enjoyed the wine, the pleasure you derive from actually knowing you haven't paid a fortune from it is great. And totally the converse of that is true as well. If you've overpaid for a wine and it's disappointing, there's nothing more disappointing than paying way too much for an average enough, or not getting that real wow factor from a wine. I think it's safe to say both of these are great wow wines. It's just, what are you prepared to pay for them? And certainly the Banffy's, I think value wise, is a fabulous wine. Fabulous wine.
And the only thing I'd add is they're almost we picked them because they were old favourites of each of us that the other one had never tried, but it's almost unfair to put them beside each other because they're so different. You're not comparing two Cab Sauves, which one's the better one, or two wines from the same vintage, which one's showing better, or any of those sort of consistency themes. They're markedly different from different parts of the world, different hemispheres, and that's the beauty of wine, that two red wines can taste so different. We get to share them at the same sitting. Gary, thanks for welcoming us into your hidden secret bunker in Ireland. It's been fantastic. We're going to go on away and enjoy these with food, and I think both these wines will only enhance the food, and the food will enhance them. So we've been interrupted from the kitchen. The kitchen is itching to get us in there. So Gary, it just remains to be said, thanks for inviting us into your secret cellar in Ireland. Hidden location. It's been a fantastic evening. Great to see you as always. And what a way to do it with such contrasting wines. I think we're going to go away and have both of them with a good McKee's teriyaki steak, and I'll be intrigued to see how these wines add to the steak and vice versa. I think they'll be fantastic accompaniments. Thanks again. Any final comments?
I just want to say thank you very much, Chris. It's a pleasure, and it's great to see you, and it's great to have you over back in Ireland. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.